Well, hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Reading Michael Jackson. I am your host, Lena, and I am delighted to be here with you to talk about love. This is, of course, a continuation of reading Michael Jackson's book, Dancing the Dream. And in this episode, we are covering one of his very short and sweet reflective pieces, sort of in the tradition of the last few weeks where we had innocence, then trust, then courage. We now have love, this big, big concept of a title that only presents in a very short piece. So it's a micro exploration from Michael, but I am looking forward to seeing what we can uncover in a reading and discussion of this piece together. So with that said, get comfortable, get cozy, and enjoy this reading of Michael Jackson's Love. Love. Love is a funny thing to describe. It's so easy to feel, and yet so slippery to talk about. It's like a bar of soap in the bathtub. You have it in your hand until you hold on too tight. Some people spend their lives looking for love outside of themselves. They think they have to grasp it in order to have it. But love slips away like that wet bar of soap. Holding on to love is not wrong, but you need to learn to hold it lightly, caressingly. Let it fly when it wants. When it's allowed to be free, love is what makes life alive, joyful, and new. It's the juice and energy that motivates my music, my dancing, everything. As long as love is in my heart, it's everywhere. Oh, Michael. I love Michael Jackson. Talking about love, let's just talk about that. How much do we love Michael Jackson? I love him so much. And to talk about a piece entitled Love, when it relates to this gentleman right here, it is impossible for me to not burst at the seams with love. I adore him, and I adore these opportunities to explore the things about him that make me love him so much. I'll tell you honestly, I have never been a person to get particularly caught up in any kind of celebrities or even artists. I've been a big fan of different artists before, and artists that I loved, but it is totally different with Michael Jackson, and I can honestly say it is still so surprising to me and so amusing to me that I developed this teenage, starry-eyed, semi-delusional obsession with him when I was in my 30s. I never even had that feeling about an artist or any other figure when I was a teenager myself. In fact, I never could relate to my friends who had big crushes on different musicians and celebrities and artists and actors and things when I was growing up. It never resonated for me. So it always has made me laugh. And the funny thing is that I've had the pleasure of attending several Michael Jackson oriented events over the years that I've been a fan. And I have met a lot of people in this fandom. And I've had such a delightful experience hearing how those who, especially those who are newer fans and discovered Michael around the time that I have, to know and discuss how they too feel like a teenager and they too relate to this feeling. And this is people from all ages, my age, younger, people much older than me who never paid attention much during Michael's lifetime, but then somehow came across him, fell in love, not even exaggerating, fell in love. And we all feel like teenagers over this man. And it's funny to me that this is the case because I am very interested in identifying what it is about Michael that makes us all so in love. And I think in a way, the answer is in this short reflection. So let me explain what I mean by that. When Michael talks about love, which frankly, this is not the first time he has in this book, and it certainly will not be the last. But when Michael talks about love, and he talks about it being sort of the essence of him and the thing that's in his heart that drives everything he does, I feel like that in itself is part of his appeal. And I can only say that because when I see Michael, when I see him perform, but mostly when I just see him speaking or interacting with people, when I watch video clips or whatever, I often have the thought that he is simply radiating love, that you can almost feel it. I mean, I've never met this man, unfortunately, but I can almost feel the radiance of love through the screen. It's one of the reasons why, as I became a fan of Michael, years after his death, after some controversy came out in 2019, 2020, as we all know, I didn't know the truth about Michael at that point. I didn't really know anything about him outside of the things I grew up hearing. But one of the reasons I felt compelled to learn about him was not just because of my enjoyment of his music, which is a reductive way of thinking about Michael Jackson fans to begin with when it comes to our interest in his the truth of his life and his story, but because I felt such sincere love from him and witnessed it, and I felt like this is incongruent, the things I hear about him, and I need to learn about the actual details of it to understand. And it wasn't because I liked him immediately, although I did. It was because it felt so impossible the more I learned about him. And then, of course, that has continued years later into my much deeper fandom as the years pass. But my point is, Michael has an energy, an aura around him, and he seems to radiate a sense of love. And I think that that's true for a lot of people who choose to lead their lives from a loving place. When you feel a deep sense of love in your heart, when you feel a deep sense of love for the world, for other people, I think it makes you more present. It makes you more grounded. It makes you more appreciative. And it makes you stronger. Your ability to withstand hardship is increased, So you can almost tell when you meet a person if they're the type of person that leads their life from a loving place. And unfortunately, not everyone does. But Michael certainly did. And Michael certainly left a lasting impression on not only his fans, but the people in his life that, to this day, those who have worked with him, that knew him, that had relations with him in any way, whether that is people he actually befriended or people who he just worked with in passing, you truly never hear an ill word about this man. You hear some things, of course, that are tied in with lawsuits and whatnot, but you don't hear from the people not trying to make money from Michael Jackson or his estate, you don't hear anything negative about him. Other celebrities, you don't hear anything negative. People were in awe of him. They loved him. They appreciated him, but he was consistently regarded as incredibly kind and incredibly loving as a person and gentle as a person. So all this is to say that I love Michael Jackson. I love him so much. And when my husband teases me about him, which he often does on a near daily basis, I always remind him, it's all for love. And it is all for love. He's beautiful and gorgeous, but it's all for love. And that's how I feel about Michael. It's all for love. Now let's talk about the actual piece. I can't help it. I feel like when I talk about Michael and love, I'm filled with like little pink hearts, It's genuinely how I feel. But let's talk about the piece itself, shall we? I love the way Michael starts this. Love is a funny thing to describe, but I love that he says it's easy to feel but slippery to talk about. Slippery to talk about is very interesting to me because I know he's leaning into this metaphor about holding on to a bar of soap that can slip from your hands if you squeeze it too hard. I love the metaphor. I think it's really a cute metaphor and still very effective. But slippery to talk about is its own interesting implication. Something being slippery, like you lose control when you talk about it. You lose a sense of really being able to control it. This makes me think about Michael's actual experiences with love and how he could possibly talk about it. I don't think, to be clear, when he says this here in this piece, he's literally talking about his love life. But I'm going to take it there. When I think about it, Michael was so incredibly private about his love life, to the point that I believe there's a lot of misconceptions about how deep and far that love life really went. I think about in Moonwalk, Michael's autobiography, he talks about how he's had many relationships with women and how many of them are people we will never hear of because they are not famous and it's not fair to them to put their names out there in association with him, which to me is really an interesting admission on his part, because we know in Michael's love life, there are a few women we always hear about that he's linked to, but that's it. In terms of the public kind of understanding of Michael's love life, there's women in the 1980s. There's, of course, his wives in the 1990s, but it's very minimal. And so I've always found that kind of fascinating because clearly Michael did not have a life in which he could talk about every relationship he had, where to some degree he was forced to be more secretive and quiet about it, but in some degree he chose to be. And I always find this aspect of Michael's celebrity so intriguing because I think about how he was brought up in the Motown era and tradition and taught at a young age how to be a heartthrob and how to get women to fall in love with him and how to treat his own romantic life as something incredibly private because of the need to remain available in the eyes of his fans. And so I think about how leaning on some of the relationships we may have heard about as the primary ones to speak about while protecting the names of some other women would have been kind of smart. At the same time, kind of difficult because it reinforces this narrative about Michael that he didn't have as many relationships in his life. But it seems to me that the answer is a lot more complicated. And I immediately think of the liner notes for Bad 25, the anniversary edition, where they released several unreleased songs, including the song Price of Fame. And in the liner notes for Price of Fame, they include a note written by Michael that is about the idea behind the song Price of Fame. And in the note, it explains that he described the story this way, quote, "The girls who are over obsessed with me, who follow me, who almost make me kill myself in my car, who just give their lives to do anything with me, to see me. They'll do anything, and it's breaking my heart. It's running me crazy. It's breaking up my relationship with my girl, with my family. That's the price of fame." And now I don't bring that to attention to talk about Michael's celebrity. I don't really think that's what this piece has anything to do with. But I'm still stuck on this line about how talking about love is slippery and how difficult it is to control. And again, the content of this piece would suggest he's talking generally about how it's difficult to find a way to talk about love and how to act when you are in love and how to treat love. Not even just romantic love either, but love as a whole. However, I can't help but draw attention to the fact that talking about love was slippery for Michael, whether talking about it in Dancing the Dream and being a little bit more general, or talking about it in his lyrics, and again, only opening up so much. He self-protected so much from the public, and it makes me wonder how that need to self-protect translated into how he acted in his own relationships. So could he be open about love? Could he be capable of that? I don't know. So it's slippery. It's slippery for someone like Michael, that he needed to talk about love. He needed to write songs about love that would appeal to his female fans. And I say that as one that is beaming from ear to ear as I talk about him. But he also needed to remain a bit elusive, or else the craziness might come out of all of us. And I'm not trying to make light of it, of course. It's a legitimate struggle that he faced. But it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of how he has his own narratives about love and how we can understand them based on his position in life. With that said, that was meant to be an aside, but I could talk about Michael's love life for a very long time, but I'll save that for another episode or perhaps another podcast altogether. But talking about love more in line with this piece, talking about the way Michael is approaching this conversation of love, I think his point is that love is not only a feeling, it's something to protect. It's something to nurture, and it's something that will die if it is too heavily controlled or restricted in some way. I think it's interesting when he says, some people spend their lives looking for love outside themselves. And I wonder if he related to that in any way, because as we know, as he got older, he did talk about how his relationship to fame and celebrity and art and performing kind of all boiled down to a desire for love. He talks about that specifically in the recordings and transcripts with Rabbi Shmuley. He discusses how it all comes down to a desire to feel love and wanting to be loved. And I think about that actually when he did his interview with Oprah. She asked him what he wants to be known for or how he wants to be remembered. And he says something along the lines of, I simply want to be loved wherever I go. So he says here, some people live their lives this way. But I would suspect that Michael did to some degree as well. And once again, this exploration of love in this short piece could be him trying to interrogate that a little bit and question himself to some degree. But of course, he says it's not wrong to hold on to love, but you have to do so caressingly, meaning with a sense of tenderness and a sense of looseness, not trying to turn it into something else, not trying to grip it too heavily, to restrict it too much, to keep it too contained. He says, let it fly when it wants. And although we can talk about romantic love the whole time if we want to, there's so many other types of love. And when I think about Michael Jackson, obviously I think about love, but I also think about creativity just as much, and how when he talked about being creative and writing his songs and working on his art, he would say, don't write the music, let the music write itself. Don't try to control it. Don't try to turn it into something. Let it unearth itself and be there to receive it as what it is. And in a way, I think that kind of applies to love as a whole. So when you love someone, whether that is a romantic partner, a friend, a child, anyone, when you love someone, I think the truest kind of love is to let that person just be and accept them as they are, and don't try to change them. Just let them come to you in whatever form they are and accept them and love them through it, not despite their flaws, but because of them just as much as anything else. Because to really love someone is to love the full breadth of them, which doesn't mean you have to put up with things that are terrible. It just means that the act of love is an act that does not involve judgment or control. Love should be and should feel like freedom. It should feel like possibility and magic and a leg up into another plane of the world. It should not feel like something that has to be restrained in some way in order to take or control. So I think about this piece and what Michael wrote about love, and I wonder, how did he apply these ideas to his own life? Is this how he was in romantic relationships? I can't stop. No, but really, is this what he was like? Did he have this sense of wanting to offer and give freedom? I would suggest maybe he did, when you consider specifically that he did not out the names of the women that he had relationships with. His life, specifically his life, would have been made much easier had he done that. Had he identified women who he was in a relationship with and publicly, owned that, it would have made his life easier. But he didn't do that. And while I imagine any women who loved him and were with him would want to be publicly in support of him, and that would be maybe a problem in their relationship that he would not allow it, I do believe when we read this, we might really consider that an act of love on his part. It's also an act of distancing someone. But let's think about how we want to read it. Again, we don't know Michael. We did not know Michael in person. So we can't assume. It's only a conversation, people. But finally, he ends at the beautiful, beautiful part where he says, as long as love is in my heart, it's everywhere. And I think that brings me back to the beginning, where Michael's radiance of love and the way that he genuinely tried to live his life through love, it's so evident. And I think about, when people would ask him, what's the secret to your music? What's the secret to the appeal of your music? And he would say things like, well, I just put my heart into it. And I mean, that sounds like a dismissive answer in a way, but I don't think it was. I think it's like, when people are really good cooks and they say they put love in it. Like, I actually believe in the transmission of that kind of energy. And I think about Michael, who had so much love to give and so much love inside of him for the world, that when he made music, when he sang, when he wrote, when that translation from, a higher being, or however, the way he describes music coming through him and out of him, that's filtering through the love inside of him. And it has to carry that love out of him and forward and project it into us. And sometimes, I will admit, sometimes when I'm listening to Michael and he's in my ears, I'm thinking, I cannot believe I'm listening to his actual voice. The voice that came from this man's body and came from his spirit and his soul. And I've never really thought about that very much with other artists. But for me, it's because I never really felt like pure love from a person based on their voice or based on their music. I've never experienced that with anyone but Michael. So that's why, for me, I do believe that he was filled with love, and his goal of projecting love, I don't even think it was hard for him. I think it was so completely natural to him that he could not help but become the most famous person in the world. Because if the world needs anything, it needs love. And it needs and craves and longs for love. Which actually reminds me of one of my favorite Michael moments. How could I say that? There are millions. When in the making of the Black or White video, there's a clip of Michael singing, "What the world needs now is love, sweet love." So maybe that's how we'll close today. Maybe we will end with a little bit of love from Michael for us to enjoy in our ears before we go out the rest of our day. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and could bear to listen to me beam and smile throughout the entire thing as I'm imagining little floaty pink hearts around me the whole time I'm talking about Michael Jackson and love. I am surprised it's taken me this long to fangirl this hard on this podcast, but here we are. Needless to say, I hope you enjoyed it. I loved being here with you again today, and I look forward to meeting with you again next week. Until then, enjoy this brief clip of our guy singing about love.
What the world needs now, love, sweet love, is the only thing. World needs now is love, sweet love. Is it? No. Is it? Isn't that Burt Bacharach? Burt Bacharach, Dionne Warwick?
Well, she sang it, but somebody else sang it. Burt Bacharach wrote it.
Yeah.
Who sang it?
Didn't Dionne do it first? If you see me walking down the street and I'm starting to ride, it's time with me. Remember those? Walk on my heart. 60s.